One of the other things that we support is people who start lawsuits. So Bobbie Ann, come on up. Let's hear it for Bobbie Ann. So Bobbie Ann is one of those persons that have taken action, and you have to come on, I think on the other side here. Oh, you want to hand those out?
Is this presentation approved by the Disinformation Governance Board?
Hi, I'm Bobbie Ann Cox. I have been here before to speak to your group several months ago. I am an attorney here in New York. I'm in Westchester County. I'm an attorney in New York for almost 25 years now. I'm here tonight to talk about a lawsuit that I filed about a month or so ago against the governor of New York State. Our favorite, right? Kathy Hochul. And it's really great that I'm here the same night as Convention of States, because Convention of States is all about government overreach, and my lawsuit is all about government overreach. So, I am representing two New York State Assembly members, one New York State Senator. The Senator is George Borrello. The Assemblymen are Assemblyman Chris Tague and Assemblyman Mike Lawler. And together with the citizens group, Uniting New York State, we are suing Governor Hochul, her Department of Health, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Dr. Mary Bassett, and the Health Planning Council. So the premise of the lawsuit is this illegal regulation that the governor and the Department of Health have promulgated through the Department of Health, and it is called isolation and quarantine procedures. I have a flyer that's going around, so if everybody can take a look at the flyer, it gives you the citation of this regulation, and it tells you a little bit about the regulation. So what this regulation does is the governor and the Department of Health gave themselves the power, so they didn't get it from anywhere else, they gave it to themselves, to pick and choose which New Yorkers would have to isolate or quarantine, either in your home, or they can take you out of your home and put you into a facility, a detention center, a facility, a detention camp, whatever you want to call it. This regulation gives them the power to remove you from your home and put you into a detention center for however long they want, okay? Could be a few days, could be a couple weeks, could be a few months, could be a couple years. There's no limit in the regulation as to how long they can tell you to isolate or quarantine. And there's no age restriction. So they can come knock on your door and take you, or they could take your child, or they could take your elderly parent, or they could take your elderly grandparent. There's no age restriction here, okay? And the premise is that they think you might have a communicable disease, okay? So they don't even have to prove that you are sick or that you harbor the disease inside you. They just have to think, maybe you were exposed. So we're gonna tell you, you have to stay in your house for the next 40 days, or you have to come with us to a facility for the next, 8 months, whatever, okay? It is so illegal on so many levels, okay? The underlying premise of the lawsuit is separation of powers. So the governor and the Department of Health are in the executive branch of government. They can't make laws. And this regulation is a law. It's a law that they're calling a regulation, they're disguising it as a regulation, but it is a law, okay? And they don't have the power, and they didn't get the power from the legislature. So the New York State legislature, the three branches we have, I'm sure everybody knows, we have the judicial branch, which is the judges and the courts. We have the executive branch, which is the governor and then her agencies beneath her. And then we have the legislative branch, which is the lawmaking body. The legislature makes the laws in New York, Okay, the legislature is comprised of two houses, the Senate and the Assembly. Okay, so the legislature could make a law to force New Yorkers to quarantine and isolate. They could. I'm not saying it would be constitutional if it passed, but let's just say they could. They would have the power to do that. They had the opportunity for the past 6 years to pass that law. Assembly Bill A416, which was proposed by Nick Perry, a Democrat assemblyman from Brooklyn, was proposed again and again and again in the Assembly, and not one person backed it. Not one assemblyman stood with him, not one assemblyman co-sponsored the bill, not one assemblyman, it never went to debate. There was never a sister bill presented in the New York State Senate. No legislator, other than the author, Nick Perry, wanted to touch it. They didn't want to go there. They didn't want to force New Yorkers to quarantine and isolate. So this regulation, the Department of Health certainly didn't get the power from the New York State Legislature, because the New York State Legislature said for 5 or 6 years straight, nope, sorry, we're not interested. We're not touching it. Nope. So they gave themselves the power. They said, okay, well, we're just going to make it a regulation. And so a regulation which is enforceable according to the reg itself, they gave themselves the power to use local law enforcement against you. So they could have the sheriff or the local police come knock on your door and say, here's your order of quarantine, come with us, please. Because we think you might have a communicable disease. Okay? So
obviously, if they don't have to present any proof to take you, there's no standard on which to determine when you can be released.
Oh yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. There's no time limit, there's no restriction. Now, I'll give a little bit of background. So the regulation is illegal because it's unconstitutional in the sense that they breached separation of powers, which is clearly laid out in our New York State Constitution, which mirrors our federal Constitution, right? So they breached separation of powers. So right there, that's illegal, unconstitutional. You can't enforce something that's a breach of the Constitution. Okay. This regulation also conflicts with existing New York State laws. So you got the Constitution, but then you have statutes that were passed by the New York State Legislature, and this regulation conflicts with those, right? So I'll give you an example. The public health law, section 2120, lays out very specifically the steps that have to be taken if somebody's going to be removed from society because they are a threat. Right? So those steps are, number one, you have to actually have a communicable disease, right? Not that the Commissioner of Health thinks maybe you do. Maybe you were exposed. Maybe someone sneezed as they walked past you or sneezed in the elevator with you, right? Number two, there has to be an investigation according to this statute, this law, which is on the books, which was passed by the New York State Legislature years ago. There has to be an investigation to see, do you pose a health threat? They can't lock you up according to the actual law. They can't lock you up just because you are sick. They have to prove that, okay, you're sick and you're a threat to the public because you're not taking the right precautions. You're going around sneezing on people and, I don't know, you're doing things, you're not being careful, whatever. You're not wearing your gloves or, whatever it is, whatever the disease is. So they can't just lock you up because, oh yeah, you do have a communicable disease. Okay. They also there has to be a hearing, and a magistrate has to write the order. So a magistrate is like, a type of judge. The magistrate has to decide, yeah, you know what? With all this evidence, after a full investigation, with all this evidence that's presented, I do think that this person is being a threat to the public health. So yes, we will quarantine this person. But this regulation that the governor and the Department of Health made throws all that out. So think about it. if an agency full of unelected, appointed bureaucrats can make a regulation that overrides a law that was duly passed by our elected representatives in the New York State Legislature, what does that do? What does that do? It's a dictatorship. It's totalitarianism. It's tyranny. It's people that were not elected by the people telling the people, you have to do this. Why do we have to do it? Well, because we said you have to do it. Okay, but where's the due process? We didn't elect you. You're appointed. Nope, doesn't matter. So we cannot let this regulation stand. We have got to get the court to strike this regulation down as illegal and unconstitutional, because if we don't, then it opens the floodgates. And now any agency, doesn't have to just be the Department of Health, but any agency could say, oh, well, we want to make a regulation. Oh, but wait a minute, your regulation conflicts with existing New York State law. Well, we don't care. Look what happened in this court. We don't care because it was upheld. The regulation it's fine. We can make regulations that overrule statutes that were passed by the legislature, right? Oh, but your regulation conflicts with the New York State Constitution. Well, we don't care. We're going to do it anyway, because they got away with it with the isolation and quarantine. So, we're going to do it too, right? So it is so important that we win this lawsuit and we tell the executive branch, I'm sorry, you need to get back into your lane. Every branch of the government has a lane. They have a description of what they're supposed to do to help our society function. And the executive branch has gone into the lane of the legislative branch. And now we have to ask the court to put them back in their lane and stay there. Stay right there. The executive branch is supposed to enforce the laws that are passed by the legislature. And I'm going to take it up to a federal level for a minute, because probably a lot of people here are familiar with the case that came down in January by the United States Supreme Court. So if you remember last year, the Biden administration, again, executive branch, said to an agency, executive branch, hey, we want you to make a regulation that says all the employers in the United States of America that have 100 or more employees have to require their employees to get the COVID-19 shot or wear a mask to work and, all this other stuff. Okay, so they got sued. The Biden administration and OSHA were sued because people were saying, wait a minute, that's not a regulation, that's a law. And you can't pass laws because you're in the executive branch. You're not Congress. Congress is the legislative branch on the federal level. So they were sued. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And in January, the United States Supreme Court ruled against the Biden administration and OSHA and said, oh, sorry guys, you crossed over into legislative domain. You made a law, you called it a regulation, but you made a law, it's unconstitutional, you don't have the power to make a law, and they struck it down. Okay, right? So one other thing, before I do some questions, one other thing I want to point out is that the legislature can pass a law and then tell an agency, hey, we passed this law, now we want you to make some regulations to help us carry out that law that we just passed. But remember what I said a few minutes ago. The New York State Legislature had that opportunity to pass a law, which is very similar in its language to this regulation, and for years they wouldn't touch it. So the executive branch, the Department of Health, did not get that power from the legislature. They didn't get it from the governor. The governor didn't have the power. Now, if people think back to when Cuomo was the governor in March of 2020, when the pandemic first came to New York, Cuomo was given extraordinary power by the legislature. They convened, they voted, and they amended Section 29A of the executive law, which gave Cuomo the power to issue directives in a time of emergency. Those directives is what everybody ended up calling mandates, right? And everybody kept saying, oh, he's got a mask mandate. Oh, he's mandating, 6 feet apart or whatever. Oh, he's telling us we can't have more than 10 people at our Thanksgiving dinner. All these mandates, all these directives. The reason he was getting away with that was because the executive law was altered by the legislature, and they gave him that power. Now, a year later, in March of 2021, they said, okay, sorry, we're going to take that back now, because he had gone so crazy with all of his mandates, and they probably felt also it's not an emergency anymore. Like, here we are a year later, right? So, and then in March, that was March of 2021, they repealed that power, they took it back, so Cuomo no longer had that power. Now, when Cuomo got that power in March of 2020, he turned around and he gave it to the agencies. So there's an executive order that he wrote in March of 2020 that said, oh, I've got this amazing power now, I can make laws all by myself, which we're not going to get into the fact that that in itself was unconstitutional because the legislature can't give the executive branch that power, but whatever, they did, let's go with it. He took that power and he passed it on to his department heads. So he said to the Commissioner of Health, okay, stop the spread of this virus. So the Commissioner of Health in March of 2020 issued this regulation that I'm suing over right now. But wait a second. They got that power from Cuomo, who got that power from the legislature, and it was temporary. After 1 year, it was revoked. So when Cuomo lost his power, don't you think the agency lost their power too? Would it make any sense that the agency could keep the power to make a law if the governor lost the power? It doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. But that doesn't matter because the current Department of Health and the current governor, Hochul, are saying, we have this power. It's not like I filed the lawsuit and then they were like, you're right. We overstepped. We don't have this power. Okay, we'll withdraw the regulation. No, they're fighting. They're fighting me tooth and nail. In fact, the first thing they did, instead of answering my lawsuit, was they removed the case to federal court. They said, this case has federal questions. This is about the federal Constitution. We should be in federal court. And I was like, are you reading the same lawsuit that I am? This is 100% about New York state law, New York state Constitution. There were a couple of ancillary references to the federal Constitution, and they grabbed it and they said, federal law, federal case. So typically it takes about a month, I'd say, maybe more, to do a motion in federal court and get it through and have a resolution. Miraculously, I reached out to a colleague of mine who is admitted in the Western District of New York, federal court, and he came on the case with me, Tom Marcel, terrific attorney based out of Albany. He came on the case with me, and the two of us working together, we were able to file the motion almost immediately, requested from the federal judge, hey, this is really important, this is an emergency, we need to get back into state court. We shouldn't be in federal court. The judge granted our expedited hearing and whatnot. We had some motion practice back and forth. We had oral arguments, and the judge said, this is not a federal case. This has to go back to the state court. So we ended up only losing a week, but better than losing a month, right? So now we're back in state court. And the Attorney General is now opposing. So we have an amicus brief that was filed by 3 New York State Assemblymen, Assemblyman Andy Goodell, Assemblyman Joe Giglio, and Assemblyman Will Barkley got together and filed an amicus brief, which is, if you're not a party in a lawsuit, but you have an intense interest in the outcome of the lawsuit, you can file a brief with the court in support of one side or the other. So they obviously wanted to support us, so they wrote this amicus brief. They tried to file it with the court and the Attorney General, because the Attorney General in New York State, Letitia James, and her office represents the governor and the Department of Health and such. So I'm dealing with the Attorney General's office. So they said, oh no, No, we don't approve of that. We don't want them to file this amicus brief. So now they're fighting against the amicus brief, and so Assemblyman Andy Goodell had to file a formal motion with the court and say, hey, judge, can I please file my amicus brief? Here are all the reasons why you should accept it, right? So now they're doing motion practice back and forth over whether or not the judge can actually read and consider the amicus brief in this case. So, yeah, they're fighting back pretty hard. Yes, you have a question.
Can I ask you, how many times do you have to strike this crap down before they can't do it? They can't keep using OSHA as a proxy or private industry as a proxy. How many times do you have to strike this down? I mean, once you get a you win it, and then there's a precedent. Do they keep trying to push stuff like this intermittently on us to see if there's a reaction from it?
I mean,
over and over again?
I'm hoping that we win this case and they don't try it again, but this is pretty egregious. I mean, this goes way beyond, forcing you to wear a mask, when you're around other people. This is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, this is unreasonable searches and seizures, right? This is fundamental, it shocks the conscience. It shocks the conscience what this regulation allows them to do, and they gave themselves the power. Yes?
People had to take vaccines and, they were hard in the meantime while these lawsuits are.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, lawsuits take time. That's why we're trying to expedite everything. Yes, you have a question in the back?
Yeah, hi. Is this considered, I have a couple questions. Is this considered a class action lawsuit? And if not, could it morph into, or could we start a parallel citizen suit or class action lawsuit? Can you do a citizen amicus brief if there's enough people? What is the New York State version of the Federal Administrative Procedures Act? And is that part of what you use in this lawsuit? Can we read the lawsuit, and how do we, or what are the other legislators doing, the assembly people and the senators?
Okay, so Uniting New York State is a citizens group. They are named as a plaintiff in this lawsuit. So if people want to be a part of the lawsuit, be involved with the lawsuit, they can simply sign up with Uniting New York State. It's free. They don't charge anything. Their website is unitingnys.com, and it should be on the flyer that was handed out. But if you go to unitingnys.com, you can sign up for their weekly email newsletters, and they automatically add you to their membership database. So then technically you would be a part of the lawsuit if you're part of that citizens group, because they're a plaintiff in the group, in the lawsuit. It's not a formal class action. Class action lawsuits have to be certified and stuff like that, but this is not that. Your question about what are the other assemblymen and senators doing, so not all of them know about this regulation. When I first started to reach out to see if any of them were interested in being a part of the lawsuit, many of them didn't know about the regulation. So, the governor and the Department of Health are usurping the power of the legislature, literally going around them to do this, and a lot of them didn't know about it. But that's part of what people can do to help, is to make their New York State senator and their New York State Assembly member aware of this regulation, aware of our lawsuit. It would be great if we had, 20 amicus briefs that were filed, because it just shows support, and it shows nobody wants this thing. Right? This is being shoved down New Yorkers' throats by unelected bureaucrats who just want to do it because, they want to do it. I don't know. Are they trying to be helpful? I have a hard time believing they're trying to be helpful and they have good intentions, because, well, you already have a law on the books. Why don't you use the law that's on the books? if you really want to protect and help and save and keep people safe, and you have a law. Go to Public Health Law 2120 and use that. That's not what they're doing. That's not what they're doing. They're taking the temporary, extraordinary emergency powers that were given to Cuomo, that he passed on to his Department of Health, and they just keep going with it. But Hochul was never given those emergency powers, and neither was her Department of Health. So they're very much out of control. Yeah.
Is what Hochul has done considered to be a crime and potentially a punishable offense?
I mean, we're not going after anybody criminally. This is a civil lawsuit. It's an Article 78 petition is what it's called. An Article 78 is a specific kind of lawsuit that is against a government actor, and you are saying to that government actor, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing over here. So Uniting New York State actually has a web page on their website which is only dedicated to the lawsuit, and all these details that I'm talking about tonight are on that website. So if you check out unitingnys.com/lawsuit, you'll see it tells you the premise of the case. It has, we did a press release up in Albany a month ago to announce the lawsuit. So it has a video of that press conference. It has photographs. It has, they made a 2-minute video commercial that explains what the regulation, briefly explains what the regulation says, and then tells about our lawsuit. So there's a lot of really good information on.
Your Rumble station?
Also on the Rumble, All Things Lawyer.
I think I shared that in the emails that I sent out. Was your
Oh, was the All Things Lawyer?
minute?
Okay, the 2-minute video. Yes, so you can find the video either on unitingnys.com, or you can find it on rumble.com if you go to All Things Lawyer. It's posted there as well. Yes.
First, I want to thank you for what you're doing, because it's awesome.
Thank you.
Secondly, I read through that regulation at length, and I did write a letter to the individual who was tasked with deciding whether it had merit to push it forward. But one of the things I noticed in reading that was when they described the disease or the condition that you had to have, they talked about communicable and they talked about highly contagious. Nothing about deadly or toxic or dangerous. And first of all, communicable and highly contagious, pretty much the synonym. And you could have pink eye, which is highly contagious. And with this regulation, so just in case you didn't think about the gravity of this, you don't have to have COVID or some other fake thing. You could have pink eye, which is highly contagious, communicable. So just wrap your heads around that. And again, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. So I just want to say that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. You're correct. The language is very broad, and it actually says, so when a regulation is being promulgated, it actually has a little bit of like background and, the purpose and the need. And yeah, it does say that, COVID is so dangerous, and COVID is so, it's worldwide, it's a pandemic, and then, they give no specifics to New York State, right? If you read it through, no specifics to New York State, and they say, well, this is why we need to do this regulation. Look what COVID's done across the world. I was like, well, this is a New York State reg. What are you talking about the world for, right? And they say in their own writing, it can range from cold-like symptoms to, very serious. And it's like, oh, so you could have cold symptoms, and they could say, oh, yes, John Smith, could you please come with us because you're going to the detention center. We're not going to tell you how long, but you're going, right? Unconscionable, right? Yes.
Yeah, my question is similar to what Gina asked about. So you got an executive branch that's driving in the wrong lane, right, and making regulations which is illegal for them to do. And we're asking whether or not is it illegal enough so they can be put in prison
Or be fined.
So yeah, right. So this is a civil case. So I can't. I'm not Yeah, so I'm not, so to go after somebody criminally, you have to be like the DA, right? So I can't go after somebody, I can't bring a criminal lawsuit against somebody because I'm not the district attorney.
If it's sympathetic, that's why I do it.
I'm sorry?
If I find a district attorney, a DA, that is sympathetic to my cause, they can do it if I can convince them.
Yeah.
Based on the law, based on the rule that they,
You'd have to.
because they told you out of your house.
Did you hear what he said?
Yeah, yeah, you can't, so, again, the district attorney, you have to be, for a crime, you have to be injured, and then you go to the district attorney and you say, you know, yeah, okay.
So you may have already addressed this, and without having you get into like a technical civics lecture, I'm wondering what it is about this particular regulation that leads you to interpret it as a law.
So, because a regulation, that's a great question. A regulation,
Question, I'm sorry.
so the question is, why do I think it's a law that's cloaked as a reg? Why don't I just think this is a regulation, a real, true regulation? So, a regulation, an agency can't do something unless they're given the power to do it. Because remember, they're appointed, they're unelected. So they have to get the power from somewhere. So Cuomo's Department of Health got the power from him, which he got from the legislature, right? The legislature could give an agency power and say, hey, we want to quarantine anybody that's sick in New York State. Doesn't matter what it is, whatever. They can pass that law and then say to the Department of Health, okay, guys, issue the regulations that give the details on how to enforce this law, right? Because when they make a law, they don't give all those little tiny details. They'll send it to the agency, and then the agency will fill in those blanks, right? Fill in the blanks, so to speak. Here, where is their authority coming from? Who gave them that power to fill in the blanks? What blanks are they filling in? I'm still waiting to find what blanks they're filling in because they didn't get the power from Hochul. Hochul doesn't have the power to give them. And they didn't get it from the legislature. They're claiming they did. They're saying Section 225 of the public health law gives them this power. Section 225 of the public health law is what they're hanging their hat on. Yeah, oh yeah, we have the power. Here it is. Look, here's our authority. That section of the public health law says nothing about quarantining or isolating people. Nothing. They're relying on, I'm not exactly sure what they're relying on because I haven't seen their answer yet. They're supposed to file it tomorrow. And they sidestepped it when they brought us up to federal court instead of answering the lawsuit a month ago. So I'm waiting to see what their explanation is as to which part of Section 225 are you relying on, because I can't possibly figure out what they're trying to rely on in there. But if they're trying to rely on really broad language in Section 225 that says, keep everybody safe and healthy. Okay, when a legislative body wants to direct an agency to do something, they have to be specific, right? Otherwise, this is what you get, right? So that's the same thing that the United States Supreme Court said in that OSHA decision back in January. They said, when Congress wants an agency to do something, they're specific about it, right? They don't try and hide an elephant in a mouse hole. That's what they said. So here, if the New York State Legislature wanted them to make a reg to isolate and quarantine people, they would say, here's the law, go ahead, Department of Health, tell us how we're gonna enforce this law. And to prove my point, A416 was right in front of them for years. They could have passed that law. And then they could have said, okay, Department of Health, here's A416, now it's a law. Tell us how we're gonna isolate and quarantine New Yorkers. But they didn't, the legislature, not one person Not one person stood up with the author of that bill. Yeah.
So as I'm gathering, every reg now has a law behind it, passed by the legislature, that's being given to an agency to create a reg.
Right.
Complying with that law.
Yes, agencies, right. Agencies can't just like make up, whatever they want, whenever they want, because then that's tyranny, right? Because then it's like, we just feel like we want to tell everybody to wear blue and have, a hazmat suit on all day. And it's like, okay, well, where'd you get that authority from, right? So they can't just make up whatever they want all the time. Yes.
Back in, I think it was late January, somebody brought up SAPA, S-A-P-A.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were involved too. And they brought up the People's Coalition of New York, I think is that the outfit? And they were like, they had this call to action about 5 different rules, okay? One of them being this 416 associated one. Then there were, it was the rule proposing school nurses permission to immunize students, personal caregiving and compassionate caregiving visitors in nursing homes and adult care facilities, and prevention of COVID-19 transmission by covered entities. There was that rule. And then there was one about face coverings. And I remember that other rule, that the one that you guys are fighting right now, which, by the way, thank you for doing awesome.
Thank you.
I don't know anything about these other rules and whether or not they were also passed.
Yeah, so
Just this one?
No, it's not just this one. No, there are face coverings, which is, known as the mask mandate. That's being challenged by, I think, 5 or 6 different lawsuits that are still going on. They're all still going on in different courts in different parts of New York State. The other, I'm not sure if the other one with the nurses, I'm not sure if that one has a lawsuit on it yet. I picked the isolation and quarantine one to go after because I felt like that was the most atrocious and obnoxious to the New York State Constitution and our freedoms as Americans. So that's why I picked that one to go after. But I think if we can knock this one out, I think there will be a fissure in their wall of their foundation of all of this. And I think that will help with everything else. The other thing is, it's super important that we win this, because if it stands in New York and it's now normal in New York, what do you think is going to happen across the country? They're going to say, oh, well, New York is forcing their New Yorkers to go into quarantine and isolate and throwing them into facilities and detention centers. Why can't we do it, right? Things start in New York, no matter what, not just laws, even fashion trends, right? Start in New York, and the rest of the country's looking, and they're like, hey, New York is doing it, great, let's do it too. So this is not just a New York local thing. This is a national thing. Look what's going on in Australia. Look what's going on in China. Yeah, and now Hochul's trying it. Yes.
What's your area of practice, your general practice?
So I have been suing the government for like 20 years now. So I, not this Article 78 type of petition, but Article 7 petition. So I am a tax cert attorney. So I sue the government locally on behalf of property owners if I think that the property owner is being unequally assessed and therefore paying too much in property taxes. So I've been suing the local government for 2 decades. This is, a little bit different because it's an Article 78 against the governor and the Department of Health. So it's a little different, but same premise of fighting for the citizens against the government. Yeah.
This is a sideline, but Dutchess County, their taxes are online, and they used to you look at a property and see how much tax they paid. They took the tax off of it. They have the appraisal. It's like they don't want people to know what their tax rate is.
Well, I know that they have to. Municipalities are required to post their tax rolls online on their websites. That is required. And I think they only have 10 days once a tax rule is made, published for it to actually be up on their website. So they can't hide the tax rolls, but that they definitely have to share.
The amount that they were charging everyone, so you can't.
Yeah, that's different, right? The actual tax bills or something, that is different, but you can figure out someone's taxes by taking their assessment, which is on the tax roll, and multiplying it by the tax rate per thousand, and then you can see how much that one's paying, that one's paying, that. So you just got to have the right tax rate per thousand. Yeah, oh yeah, it makes it harder. Well, why would the government make it easy for you? Yeah, go ahead, in the back.
Does the CDC have the authority to track people on their iPhones? Because there's an article in newsbreak.com where it says CDC tracked millions of phones to see if Americans followed COVID lockdown orders. And it was really strange because on my phone and another friend's phone that our government alerts were turned on. I had mine turned off. One day, it was really strange. And she said to me, look under your name. And it wasn't under my name, but it said, know that. No, and then VAC. And when I went to hers, it also said that. And we were like freaking out because we shut our government alerts off. But it was a day where our phones were really acting strange. So I'm just wondering, because knowing what happened in Australia, knowing what happened in China, I know they're really emphasizing on the news, which I don't really like to watch, but once in a while it's on and I catch it, about all these gun shootings. I know they're trying to enforce, taking people's guns away, because once they do that, then you're powerless. But
Yep, then you're Canada, then you're England, then you're all these socialist and.
actually track our phones now?
So that I don't know. I've never looked into that, so I can't speak to that. But
They have the whole article.
But I can tell you that there is a proposed bill. There's proposed legislation in the New York State legislature that would require all adults in New York State to have their vaccination status for all vaccines entered into a statewide database. That is a bill that has been proposed by on the Democrat side. So think if that passes and this reg stands. Okay.
Paving the way. I mean.
And they also.
They've gone away with already. It's just amazing because half citizens don't know about it unless you're going to other sources to get your information.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes.
There's an approach that you're using, which, I'm very thankful that someone's speaking out and actually spending their hours and hours and hours filing lawsuits within the system to do this. Well, what about like the domestic violence clause? That's a clause in our Constitution where there are factions within the United States that are acting upon the citizens or color of law. Wouldn't that be more like, a power punch and get these people in jail or otherwise? And
No,
there's domestic violence. I mean,
Yeah.
a PCR test. That's not. They haven't even isolated the virus as a thing. And
Yeah.
they're doing all this and they're promoting all this.
This is, yeah, so this lawsuit is all about government overreach, separation of powers. I'm not asking the court to decide if quarantining people works. That's not part of this lawsuit. In fact, I say very clearly in the lawsuit, I'm not asking you, Judge, to tell us if you think that quarantining people or putting them into facilities will stop the spread of a disease. It's not what this is about. This is about this side of staying in your lane. The executive branch has to go back in their lane, because if we don't put them back in their lane, they're going to do whatever they want, whenever they want. This regulation that I'm fighting is currently issued as an emergency reg. And what she keeps doing is every couple months, she has the Department of Health and the Health Planning Council redo it. Oh, emergency, couple more months. And it's a violation of this SAPA, the State Administrative Procedures Act, which goes to your question. Sometimes they reissue it for 90 days, which they just did. April 22nd, they issued it until July 20th. The State Administrative Procedures Act clearly says that when you're repromulgating an emergency reg, it's for 60 days. So right there, they're not following the statute, right? And then they have other State Administrative Procedure Act violations that are all laid out in my lawsuit. But she's also trying to have it made a permanent regulation. So in the New York State Register, which is if you want to look something up to see if it's a regulation, if it's an emergency reg or a permanent reg or whatever, you can go online, look up the New York State Register, and then you can do a search and see. Yeah.
I'm very in favor of this lawsuit, and I'm very happy what you're doing. But I'm very concerned about what the WHO is trying to do with the regulations, for global regulations for all countries, and would go across over the constitutions.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we would win this lawsuit, would, if the WHO is going to do what they're going to do with all these regulations for a new pandemic.
Yeah, but the states have immense power to have their legislature pass laws, to have their governor sign them into laws. Like if you look at red states versus blue states in our nation right now, you see that the red states, the citizens live much more freely, even today. Not just, 2 years ago. So state autonomy is key. This regulation has to be struck down because it does affect state autonomy. And again, it's laying the groundwork for something more, right? Because if they get this power, they're not just going to take this power. You give an inch and they take a mile. So before we wrap it up, I just want to say there are ways for people to get involved. So, if you are so inclined to get involved, on unitingnys.com, if you go to the lawsuit page, there are a list of things that people can do. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a paralegal. There are a list of things that people can do to get involved. Our biggest thing is educating other people, because we are being censored like you wouldn't believe. Mainstream media won't touch this. In fact, they're doing just the opposite. Hey, look over here, look what's happening in Ukraine. But meanwhile, look at this regulation that's right here in front of our faces. So we have the 2-minute video that you could share with people, push out on emails, post it on your social media. We have these flyers that I handed out tonight. Those are on that web page. You could print them out. You could tack it up in your local library, your local supermarket billboard. You could hand it out at your next school board meeting. Talk about it verbally with your friends and your family when you go to a cocktail party or a dinner or whatever. Please help spread the word. It is the main thing that we're asking people to do. We have videos you can share, not just the 2-minute one. I did an interview last week on Real America's Voice. That's on the website as well. It's also on my Rumble channel. Please share those things because people need to know that this reg exists. People need to know that we're standing up and we're fighting back, and hopefully people will get involved. If anybody wants to volunteer with the lawsuit, that's great. If you know anybody that's in media, a radio show host, somebody that writes for a newspaper, somebody that's a blogger, somebody that does a podcast, whatever, somebody that's on TV and TV newscaster, if you know anybody in those arenas, please reach out to them and say, hey, there's this reg, there's this lawsuit. I'm happy to talk to anybody, do an interview, whatever it takes to get the word out there, because people need to know. We cannot let democracy die in darkness. We can't. We can't. There's a donate button on the webpage. I'm doing all of this voluntarily for free. It's a pro bono lawsuit, so I'm not getting paid. If you can donate, great. If you can't, ask other people to donate. No donation is too small. So yeah, there are so many things you can do. please, please go on the website and just spread the word. Pass around our flyers, pass around our videos, and I would really appreciate, that's how everybody can help win this fight. So, thank you. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Bobbie Ann.